Hi, everybody. So we are now live talking about bird skulls. I'm so sorry that we're a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties, of course. So I am here today to chat with you about bird skulls. And my name is Carolyn Byers. I'm the Director of Education at Madison Audubon. Usually I am out in the community teaching kids at schools or neighborhood centers. Usually I see about 200 to 300 kids a week in Madison, Wisconsin. But life is different now. And so we're trying to put a lot of content online for everybody. So I'm so very excited to talk about bird skulls today. One more thing I want to mention before we get started is that we have a lot of resources online now. They're all available for free. And it's all about connecting kids or adults with nature. And it could be in your backyard, it could be at a local natural area, it could be on a walk in your neighborhood, or even just through your window. So if you're looking for ways to get outside or see something new about nature, check it out. You can find it at the Madison Audubon website. That's madisonaudubon.org. And it's on our page called Safer and Funner at Home. And there's all sorts of things there. So we are going to talk about skulls today. And on that Safer and Funner webpage, there's going to be a section all about bird skulls. And all of the skulls that we're talking about today, we're going to have pictures of them and pictures of the birds with feathers and eyes and everything. So if we talk about a bird that you haven't seen before or don't know what it is, check out that document there and you'll be able to. It looks like it's all being shared in the comments right now, so you can click if you like. So the first thing I want to say is that finding skulls outside is really, really cool, and I like it. Same with finding scat, which is actually poop. Animal scat, bones, feathers, fur, all those things are really neat to find outside because you don't actually have to see the animal to know that it was there. It's like a little secret. You can play nature detective. I do want to say, though, that if you find bird feathers or bones or skulls or eggs or nests, it's okay to check them out, look at them. If you have an adult there, you can pick them up. And, if you're being safe, you don't want to, obviously, you want to wash your hands when you're done. But hi, Wyatt and Sun Fairy. Good to see you. After you're done looking at them, you want to make sure you leave all the bird parts out there in nature because birds are protected here. And it's actually illegal to have them in your home, any birds or bird parts. And so you can either have a permit to keep them at home, which is something that Madison Audubon has, so that we can use them as a teaching tool, or you can get replicas, and that's what we have today. So I have all kinds of bird skull replicas to share with you. And this one is actually a red-tailed hawk. And we're going to see all kinds of bird skulls today. So I wanted you to know that all of the bird skulls that we have today that I'm sharing with you are made out of plastic. And I think that's really neat because they're extra durable and they'll last for a really long time. So we've got these bird skulls, and the first thing I want us all to do is actually feel our own skull. So animals that are vertebrates, which we have a spine. Everybody feel your back right now. The knobby things right down the middle of your back, that's your spine. Feel your skull. All of our bones are inside of our body, and they help provide structure. They help us to sit up straight or walk, and they're a place for our muscles to attach to so we can move our bodies. And our skull especially is really important because it protects all of the soft stuff inside of our head. It protects our brain. It's a good spot for our eyes to be. Of course, it's where our mouth is and our teeth and where we eat. So our skull is really important. And actually, I have this to share. So this is a human skull. It's a male skull. It's actually maybe I have a pretty big head. It might be about the same size as mine. Yeah, someone noticed I'm wearing bird skull earrings today. That's pretty fun. I love pulling them out when I teach about skulls. So this is our human skull. And you can see that here the nose, it's actually a lot smaller than our nose because our nose has a lot of cartilage in it. Everybody wiggle your nose. That squishy part is the cartilage, and the hard part up here is the bone of our nose. And you can see all of the teeth are in the skull here. And this is where the mandible, the lower part of the skull, that's where it moves. You can feel back here where it touches the other part, the bigger part of our skull underneath your ear. Actually, this skull does something really cool. It opens up. You can see inside of it. And that's where your brain would be. And we have a really enormous brain compared to the size of our skull and our head. It's huge. And we'll make sure we take a look at how big a bird's brain is a little later. And down here is where the spinal cord comes out, and that connects to our brain and sends messages all throughout our body. So we have a human skull. We're mammals, right? And next, I want to show you a whole bunch of bird skulls really quick, because birds, they all have beaks, right? That's a part of being a bird. And bird beaks are really adapted to what they do. So birds use their beaks as a tool, and they pick things up, they hold things with their beak, they eat with their beak. Many of them catch food with their beak. Some catch food with their feet and then rip it apart with their beak. So beaks are very specialized. There are very, very long beaks, like this great blue heron. This is also a very, very long beak. I'm going to hold it, see, right in front of my forehead so you can see it. Very long beak, but it's actually a hummingbird. It's so teeny, teeny, tiny. Another long beak is a duck. It's very long and flat. A short beak is this great horned owl. It's nice and short, and it's got this big hook at the end. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, woodpecker beak. Woodpecker beaks are pretty long too, but they're very thick and strong and pointed. Oh, and here's one more cool one. This is a northern cardinal beak, and it is very short and squat, but wide and strong. And we're going to talk about more about all of these in just a minute. But the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between mammal skulls and bird skulls. So I have some mammal skulls with me. And the first one I want to share with you is this one. And this one has very big teeth. It's actually missing one of its teeth here. It doesn't have teeth right here, and then it has more teeth down here. And it's got very, very strong, this is called the zygomatic arch. Everybody feel your cheekbones. Those are your zygomatic arch. And this is where all the chewing muscles attach to the skull. And so this is a beaver skull. And beavers are, they're a prey animal, which means that other animals eat them. Beavers eat a lot of plant parts. They eat the cambium layer of the bark of a tree, which is the layer right under the bark. And they eat other plants too. But beavers, one of the cool things about them, because they're a prey animal, their eyes kind of point straight out to the side. And that helps them look for predators along their whole sides. They have a really large field of view. Their peripheral vision is great. And I have another mammal skull here. This one is very large. Can you guys see that all right? It's a little bright. There we go. So this is a wolf skull. It's really huge. And wolves are a predator animal, and their eyes point forward. That allows them to have very good depth perception, which helps them catch their prey. But one thing we've been talking a lot about for these mammal skulls is all of their teeth. Prey and predators have teeth in mammals. And that's one of the things that are very different about birds. Birds do not have teeth. Some birds have little ridges along their beaks, and those are called lamellae. But they're not actually teeth. And that's one of the ways birds, their skulls became lighter to help them fly. Teeth are really heavy, and it doesn't matter to us much. We're not flying. We have really strong muscles. But for birds, being lighter is a really big thing. So they have no teeth for that. Another thing we already talked about is that bird skulls have beaks. That's a really easy way to tell if your skull is a bird skull. Birds have their brains are really, really big compared to the rest of their skull. So let's look at this beaver skull again. And its brain case maybe goes from here to here, but it's really, really shallow. And a lot of this area is taken up with where the ears go and the teeth. So not much of this is actually brain, even though their skull is very, very large. But a skull like this woodpecker skull, this whole back area here is where their brain fits. So compared to the size of their skull, the size of their head, their brain is really big. It takes up a lot of space. Birds are pretty smart animals. Another cool thing that birds have, a lot of birds, they have this ring, this little bony ring around their eye, and that is called a sclerotic ring. And some birds have a bigger sclerotic ring than others. You'll see that one? This is a crow. Let me find a really neat one. Where did that owl go? I lost my owl. Here it is. This owl has really, really huge sclerotic rings. And these are to help support their enormous eyes. Birds have huge, huge eyes for the size of their skull. So here's my beaver skull again. And their eye would probably be about the size of the tip of my finger here, just peeking out there. And so when you think about how big their skull is, their eye takes up just a really little spot. Same thing for our eyes. Our eyes are not that big in our head. Owls have really big eyes, for sure. Bigger than a lot of animals do. But their eyes take up about half of their face. They're enormous. They take up a lot of room in their skull. Same thing with this great blue heron. It's a very, very large eye in their skull. One thing I'm noticing here is the bird's nostrils. And there's a few different holes for this great blue heron, but this is the one right here that's visible when you're actually looking at the bird. And one of my favorite things when I'm watching birds is to see if they turn their head just right so I can look straight through their nose. I love finding either birds in real life or pictures of birds where I can see straight through their nose. I think it's the greatest. Here is a sandhill crane skull. And sandhill cranes and great blue herons, they actually look a lot alike. Well, they look a lot alike with their skulls, but also when you actually see the birds in real life. But one thing I think is really cool about this is, like, look how big this opening is right here on the skull. But when you look at either a picture of a sandhill crane or them out in the wild, the part you can look through, well, how I like to look through it, is really very small. And so I think it's neat that this huge opening is hidden under their beak. Oh, we didn't talk about what beaks are made of yet. Beaks are made, well, there's the bony part underneath, like this. And then there's this colorful coating on them, and it's made out of keratin. And that's actually very similar to the stuff that our fingernails and our hair is made out of. It just takes on a little different form in birds. And it's very shiny and very hard and strong. And often when you find a skull, the keratin on the beak is still there. And it can last for a very, very long time. Other times you'll find them and they're pretty degraded, like this one, and there's no keratin on it. All right, so we talked a little bit about mammals versus birds. We talked a little bit about predator versus prey and which way their eyes face. But I want to show you some bird examples of predators. So I have this bald eagle skull right here, and this is another predator. And with birds, prey animals for birds, their eyes point literally on the sides of their heads, which is why sometimes you'll see birds kind of like look into the side in weird ways to try and see something. That's because they have to turn their heads to make their eyes see what they want to see. So for most predator birds, their eyes don't really point directly forward. It's more kind of in between that, right out to the side and forward. So this bald eagle, its eyes are pointing about like that. And like I said, because their eyes point more forward or completely forward, like this owl, this great horned owl, it gives them binocular vision. And the two eyes focusing together and overlapping a little bit in what they see helps these animals have great depth perception, which means that they're able to tell exactly how far away something is in front of them. And something you can check is to close one eye and try to reach out and touch something, or put your finger over something that you're looking at, and then open that eye and close the other eye. And your finger will jump around a little bit as you're opening and closing your eyes. And that's because our binocular vision, our eyes see slightly different things, and our brain makes it so that we know exactly where that thing is out in the real world. So when you find a skull and you're trying to figure out what it might be, you can look to see where the eyes are positioned to learn if it's a predator or a prey animal. So we talked about the diversity of skulls, how many different types of bird beaks there are out there. We talked a little about predator versus prey and mammal versus bird. Now I want to talk about one of my favorite things, other than looking through birds' noses. It's generalists versus specialists. And we talk about this a lot in my classes. I suppose I should say hey to any kids out there listening from Muir Elementary, Lincoln Elementary, Mendota or Monona Elementary, also Goodman Community Center, Vericourt, and Bayview Neighborhood Center. Hey everybody, it's good to see you. Anyways, we talk about generalists versus specialists a lot. And if you think about those words, general sounds a lot like generalist. And that just means that an animal can do a lot of things. So if we're talking about an animal's diet, so that's what they eat, and they're a generalist, it means they can eat a lot of things. I am a diet generalist. I eat lots of vegetables and fruit and popcorn and some meat and greens. So I'm a diet generalist. The other word we're using is specialist. And if you say the word specialist, you hear the word special in there. And that means that they need a special thing, or they do a special thing. So if we're talking about an animal's diet, a specialist is one that eats one or two things. So a vegetarian in humans might be considered a diet specialist. And humans are a little different because we're mostly choosing what we eat, of course. But there are animals out there who really are diet specialists. Like a panda eats only bamboo. Or an oyster catcher mostly just eats oysters. That's a type of bird, not an oyster. An oyster catcher is a type of bird. And so a lot of our birds, their beaks, sort of reveal whether or not they're a diet generalist or a specialist. So I want to talk about this crow. And this crow is really a generalist for everything. So an animal, you can talk about generalist or specialist in habitat, and crows live everywhere. They live in cities, they live in the country, they live in farms, they live way up in Alaska, they live in Florida and Hawaii. There's species of crows all over the world. So they can live anywhere. And crows also eat almost anything. And so they have a beak that is really good for holding and turning and manipulating things. They can use their beak to pound on things, to open them up. They're not as good as a woodpecker at it, but they can get into stuff. They can use their beak to tear and rip. They're not as good as, say, a bald eagle is at that, but they can use their beak like that. So generalist birds, they have beaks that are sort of, but not too pointy, kind of, but not too long. They are a little bit, but not too wide. They're sort of an average. Another bird that has kind of a generalist beak is this robin. They eat a lot of different types of insects. And they're really good at holding and turning and moving things. So this is another bird that kind of has a beak about that shape. Cool. So a bird, let's see, a bird that's more of a specialist would be this cardinal. Where's the best way to do that? That's pretty good. So this cardinal has a pretty specialized beak. We said earlier that the cardinal's beak is almost as large as its entire head. It has a very, very large beak. And this beak is made for, well, not made for, it has evolved to crack open seeds. Cardinals have very strong beaks, very strong muscles. They have stronger bones right here to help their muscles all attach. And they spend a lot of time cracking open super hard seeds to get to the soft, delicious parts on the inside. And one of the really cool things about cardinals, and this doesn't have to do so much with their beaks or how they've evolved. I've done some bird banding back when I was a scientist, not a teacher. I'm kind of a scientist now, but I was mostly a scientist then. And bird banding is where you catch birds like this and you put a little metal bracelet on their leg, and that helps other scientists track where these birds have been. And when you catch them, you need to hold them and you take some measurements, and it all happens very quickly. And so you're releasing the bird very soon, and the birds generally just fly away, and they're a little grumpy, but perfectly fine. But cardinals are very feisty, and they have this very, very big beak. And so when you hold them, you have to be very careful that they don't bite you. And I know a guy who was banding a cardinal, and the female cardinals are the feistiest of all the cardinals. And he was holding this cardinal in his hand, and he finally got ready to let her go. And he just opened his hand, and the cardinal was biting his thumb and just held on. And he had to bounce his hand around a little and say, okay, go. And the cardinal then finally let go and flew away. So these cardinals are not something you want to mess with. I would much rather hold a hawk than a cardinal. So speaking of that, let's go check out a hawk. This is our red-tailed hawk. And actually for this one, the bottom of the beak actually came unglued. So it comes apart. So you can see that this hawk has a very sharp hooked beak. And hawks are an animal, they're a predator, and their eyes point almost forward, almost completely forward. And these animals, they catch their prey with their feet, and then they use their beak to rip up the prey. And usually hawks are catching, well, they catch a fair number of small things like mice and voles and little rodents like that. But they also catch, red-tailed hawks are very strong, and they can catch squirrels and rabbits and sometimes skunks. And so those large things, they can't just swallow them. They have to rip them up first. And this is the tool they use when they rip it up. That's a very, very strong beak. And also look at, it's a pretty short beak for the size of the skull. And that helps to give it a little bit of strength. A shorter thing is a little bit stronger than a long thing when you want to use it for ripping. And so their little short beaks help them rip apart the animals that they want to eat. And let's check out, this owl also has a very short beak with a little hook on the end of it. And so does this bald eagle. And both of these animals use their beaks the same way that the red-tailed hawk does. This bald eagle likes to rip apart the fish that it eats. Bald eagles also eat a lot of dead animals, carrion, roadkill sometimes. And so they're both ripping up meat. And this great horned owl actually eats a lot of the same things that the red-tailed hawk does. Rabbits and skunks and mice and rats, things like that. All right. Skulls are cool. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in. I would love to answer them. What other birds do we want to talk about? I have a turkey and a turkey vulture. You want to see them both? All right, so this is the turkey vulture. And this is another one where the beak has come apart just a little bit. I'm going to hold them over here. This is the turkey vulture. And remember when I said that you can see through birds' nostrils? This turkey vulture has a very, very large nostril, and I love it when I can see through them. And turkey vultures are actually one of the birds with the best smells. Best smells. Turkey vultures do not smell good. The best senses of smell in Wisconsin. And I think there's a really great video online you can find that David Attenborough leaves out some rotting steaks in the middle of a forest and waits to see when a vulture comes to find them. And it's very quick. Turkey vultures, in particular, are very good at smelling dead things because they eat dead things. Turkey vultures are so important to our ecosystems because they eat dead things. And most people don't really like them. I think they're cool. They probably get a bad reputation because they eat dead things. But think about what would happen if there were no turkey vultures around. All of the dead things would just pile up. It would take forever to get rid of them. And so turkey vultures are important because they help to recycle animals after they die. And that's also a really good reason to, if you see roadkill on the road, you should have an adult very carefully move it to the side of the road or even further off the side of the road, because a lot of turkey vultures get hit by cars while they're eating roadkill. Anyway, so turkey vultures, I said, have a very good sense of smell, but they actually smell pretty terrible, partly because they eat dead stuff, and that's why they have no feathers on their head either. Obviously, this one has no feathers. But when this has all of its skin on, turkey vultures, if they're an adult, they have a red skin on the top of their head. And that's because if they were reaching into dead bodies to try and eat the meat on the inside, if they were covered in feathers, those feathers would get covered in blood and guts and gore, and that would be a spot where, they could grow a lot of microbes, and disease would grow a lot of disease. Oh, I'm not phrasing this right. A lot of things could grow on them if they had a lot of feathers there. It's much easier to keep clean if you just have skin on the top of your head. And so that's one way that turkey vultures stay healthier, even though they're eating off of dead bodies or carcasses, animal bodies. Another cool thing about turkey vultures is when they get scared, they'll actually throw up at whatever is scaring them. So if, say, you're a scientist trying to study turkey vultures and you need to capture them, you should wear a raincoat because they'll throw up on you. And if you think about what they eat, and then it spent some time in their guts digesting and getting all juicy, and then to be thrown up on with all of that, that would be, I've never smelled it, but I bet it smells pretty powerful. And my final cool turkey vulture fact is just that. To keep cool, turkey vultures will poop on their legs. And as the wind blows over their legs, it cools them down. So that's another reason turkey vultures don't smell so great. But they have an amazing sense of smell. So next time you see a turkey vulture flying or even perched somewhere, try to take a look at its nose and see if you can see right through it, because I love it. All right, so that was the turkey vulture. Now here is the turkey. And this might be one that's kind of hard to see there. That's a little better. The turkey, the wild turkey, has a pretty generalist beak too. It's a little bit shorter than that. They spend most of their time eating, they eat a lot of things. Insects, things like snails and slugs and all kinds of bugs. They also will eat frogs and small snakes and really anything that they can fit down their mouth. And a lot of acorns too and other nuts. And they scratch around in the ground under the leaves and other brush, and they try to, there we go, uncover things with their feet and then pick it up with their beaks. So they have to be able to handle and turn and move all of those different types of things with their beaks. Also, look at how big the nose hole is for this turkey. That's kind of cool. They have pretty big eyes for their face too. Very large. Okay, I think we have talked about most of the skulls I have out here. Does anybody have any questions? Anything they want to say before we move on to the next part? No? So we talked about generalists versus specialists, a whole bunch of specialist beaks. Oh, let's talk about these specialist beaks. Do you remember what these were? This is the great blue heron, and this is the sandhill crane. And part of the reason I can tell them apart is because the great blue heron in our collection still has the keratin coating on it, or rather the plastic replica has paint on it. But the other thing that makes it really easy to tell apart is that the sandhill crane has this big forehead here. It's got a very round shaped head. And the great blue heron has a very flat forehead, very flat, long head. So even if you find their skulls, you can know what the bird is just by the shape of their head and the beak. But both sandhill cranes and herons eat very similar things. A heron probably eats a lot more fish than a sandhill crane, but both of these birds are very tall, long-legged, long-necked wading birds, and they spend an awful lot of time looking for frogs and fish and snakes. And I think sandhill cranes eat probably more plant matter than great blue herons do. You can see sandhill cranes walking around in fields and grasslands a lot more than herons. Herons are pretty restricted to water. But they both use their beaks to reach down and stab things or grab them through the water. And great blue herons will actually stab fish right through their bodies and pull them up like a spear. So they have very similar beaks, but they use them in mostly similar ways. But the great blue heron, a lot of stabbing. This is fun. All right, so I think that was all that I really wanted to say about bird skulls. There are some really, really cool skulls that we have. So now I would like, so first of all, if anyone has any questions, type them in. Let me know. I can answer them right here. And there are a few questions here. So Wyatt wanted to know if I have a chickadee skull, and I don't have a chickadee skull. I'm really bummed about that, actually. I should try to get one. The closest I have in size is probably the robin or the cardinal, but they're both a lot bigger than a chickadee. So that would be a very cute little skull. Thanks for asking that question, Wyatt. And the other question is, how do we know it is a turkey vulture flying? That's a really good question. So turkey vultures are very easy to identify, even if they're far away in the distance. And when birds fly, they hold their wings in what's called a dihedral. And that just means how flat the wings are. And so when eagles fly, for example, let's pretend these are my wings flying. When eagles fly, their wings are very flat, bald eagles. And so when a turkey vulture flies, their wings are shaped like a V. Ooh, this is really hard with this camera angle. They hold their wings like a V. And when they're flying, they teeter like this on the wind. So if you ever see a bird flying with their wings in a very strong V shape and teetering, that's a turkey vulture. And you can see that even when they're just specks in the sky, you can still tell they're a turkey vulture. And someone asked to see the top view of the red-tailed hawk skull. Yes. This is the top of the red-tailed hawk. And it's got some pretty cool bones projecting off here. And I don't know exactly what those are for. I'm not a skull expert, but if I were to make a hypothesis about it, I would say that they're, whoops, the bottom beak fell off there. I would say that that's an extra adaptation to protect the eye when they're swooping in and trying to hunt. So does that give it a good enough view for you there? Top view of the red-tailed hawk. Very cool. So what we're going to do next, I'll tell you what you need so everyone can get ready. We're going to need a piece of paper and a pencil, or anything that does that job. And keep your questions coming because I can answer them while we get set up. So a week or two ago, we did a class on nature journaling, and we did something at the end of that called 8-minute notes. And I would really like to do some 8-minute notes today. So we're going to take a minute or two to all gather our supplies, and then we'll start our 8-minute notes. So anyone who's not interested in that, you can jump ship now if you want to, or you can send some more questions your way and I can answer them while we're working on 8-minute notes. So everyone grab your pen or your pencil or your markers and a piece of paper, and we're going to get started very soon. I want to show you guys while we're waiting. I want to show you some teeth on this wolf because there's a word that I really love sharing with kids. Well, not just kids, everyone. So wolves have, well, all carnivores have really cool teeth. They have these canines here. They're very long and pointy, and we actually have canines too. There are long, pointy teeth. But the very special teeth that carnivores have are right back here. And these teeth, they make this really cool shearing motion. They're like knives that help cut meat. And they're called their carnassial teeth. Everybody say carnassial. Carnassial. I love that. These are their carnassial teeth. And this is a really good way to know that your skull is a predator and a carnivore. And because they use those teeth for cutting meat. So someone else just asked, what is the biggest bird skull of Wisconsin birds? Well, I know that our very large birds are the turkey and the bald eagle, but I also know it kind of depends on what you're asking. Is it the length, like the sandhill crane, because that's much longer, but this feels a little bit heavier to me than this just because there's so much mass in this big, strong beak. But I also know that we have pelicans that live here, and I think that would probably win in terms of both length and weight of the skull. So if anyone has other guesses about that, you can type them in for sure. But I think the pelican is probably the largest bird skull in Wisconsin. It's a good question. Okay, so we are going to get started with our 8-minute notes. Keep the questions coming. I'm happy to keep answering them. So the first thing you want to do is write the date at the top of your journal page, and it's April 10th, 2020. So you can write April 10th or you can write 4/10/2020. And then the next thing, once you get the date on your paper, is I want you to make a big plus sign all across the entire page. So you're dividing your page into 4 parts, okay? And the first thing we're going to do, well, we're going to fill in each of the sections, and you're going to get 2 minutes per section. And that means that you kind of have to write quickly. That also means that spelling is not important, and you just need to get information on the page. So don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about writing incomplete sentences if you don't want to. And the first thing we're going to do, it's going to be in the top left box, and it doesn't really matter. You can just pick a box. We're going to write something that happened, and I want you to think about something that happened during this class. So it could be something that I did. It could be something that happened in your home while you were watching it. Maybe someone else who was watching it with you did something silly or fell off the chair, or a big car started making noise and you couldn't hear what was going on. So spend 2 minutes now and write about something that happened. Ready? Go. I'm going to get a timer going so that I know what we're looking for. Okay, cool. Does anyone else have questions about bird skulls? No? Let me see what else I have to talk about then. Well, I really like this duck skull. This duck has a pretty big nostril hole too. I like that for each one I've talked about its nostrils. Ducks have really neat beaks too, and a lot of them have very specialized beaks with different shapes depending on what they do with them. And some of them have very wide, flat beaks, and they use their beak to sort of go like this under the water, and it stirs up little creatures that they can eat. There's other birds, they're called mergansers. They're related to ducks. And those birds have very long, narrow beaks with very, very pokey lamellae on them. And those birds actually dive underwater and they catch fish with their beaks. And those very pokey lamellae help them to hold the fish, even though it's slippery. And you have a little less than 1 minute left for that first 8-minute notes. And so all of the duck beaks also help you to understand what the ducks are eating. There's a bird called an eider who eats a lot of, I forget if they're mussels or something like it, but they're a sea duck, and they live off the coasts in the ocean. They dive down and they eat little animals that build shells around their bodies. And so their beaks are also really good at crunching open those shells. Okay, so that first section on 8-minute notes is over. If you want to, when we're done, you can go back to that section and fill out more. Now you're going to pick another box, maybe the one right next to that one. And I want you to write about something that you saw. And you can start right now. And I'm going to give you some ideas. So you're writing about something you saw today. And I suppose you could write about something you saw out the window while you were watching this, but you could also write about your favorite bird beak that you saw, your favorite bird skull, or maybe a part of the skull that you didn't know about before. Yeah, you can write about any of that, any cool bird beak adaptations. That's neat. So we have, a minute and a half to write about that now. Someone asked which skulls are on my earrings. So these are also plastic replicas, and they're a little bit smaller than real life. It's actually a raven skull, and they have a much larger beak than a crow in proportion to their head, and they also have a generalist beak. It is a pretty big beak for a generalist, but it's really good at holding and picking up and turning and digging. And ravens and crows actually can use tools too. They can use sticks and wires and bend them in order to reach things that are maybe in holes or places scientists put them. So they use their beaks for a lot of different things. They're one of my favorite birds. They're very, very smart. So we have another 30 seconds until we're done with this section in our 8-minute notes. Who's got more questions? What do you think? I would really love to see a shoebill skull. A shoebill is a huge stork, lives in Africa, and sometimes it eats baby alligators, which is really cool when you think about a bird eating a baby alligator. That's intense. But they have these really, really large beaks that are like a pelican's beak, kind of. It's huge and boat-like and enormous. And I would love to see a shoebill skull sometime. So I'm hoping maybe after this, I'll go and I'll Google it and see exactly what it looks like. All right, so we're done with that section in our 8-minute notes. So now you're going to move to another block. You should have 2 filled in and 2 empty. And now I want you to write something that somebody said. So it could be something I said, maybe a fact about a skull, or it could be something that somebody said who's sitting next to you watching this too. So maybe someone thought something was really cool and said, wow, that's awesome. So write down something someone said and start now. You have 2 minutes. And if you really want to get fancy, when you're writing something someone said, remember to put that in quotes. And then at the end, you can write Carolyn said or mom said. Okay? And maybe adults can help with quotes and how you write that someone said something. Let's see, what else? I have a human skull. And once upon a time, I was TAing a class for terrestrial vertebrates, and they had a whole bunch of skulls. And I chose, one really cool thing that a lot of people don't know is that there's actually many bones that make up the skull. It's not just one solid bone. And so humans actually have about 20 bones in their skull, and they're all pretty well ossified, they're solidified. So they've become one very strong unit. But there's about 20 bones in here, and birds only have about 11 bones in their skull. So that's kind of neat. But all of these bones have different names. Like in here, in the nose, I'm picking his nose a little bit. It's your vomer in there. This is the frontal bone. And so one time while I was teaching this class, I took some paints and I painted all of the bones a different color so that it would help students to know where all the different bones were. And I thought that was really fun, both as an art project and also when I was trying to learn them. I thought it was a lot easier. All right, we have 15 seconds left in that section. 15 seconds. And then the last section is my favorite. All right, 3, 2, 1, stop writing. All right, for this last section, I want you to draw something. And you can draw something from memory. You can look at the webpage that was posted in the comments. There's all sorts of skull pictures there. I'm also going to hold up, let's see, I'm going to hold up the bald eagle skull. And if anyone else wants me to hold up a different skull, you can let me know. So if you want to, you can draw this bald eagle. And I'm going to say go right now. And start drawing. You've got about 2 minutes there. That's a good angle for it. Okay. So I am going to talk about this skull as though I was drawing it. And I'm going to be a scientist. Okay. And as I'm noticing the skull, I'm sorry I keep moving him. I'm noticing that this part of the skull, where the brain and the eyes are, is about as long as the beak is. So when I draw that, I might try to make that the same size, measure them. I would also notice that this here, how tall this is almost as tall as this is when you include the point. So they're pretty evenly balanced. I would notice that the eye has a sclerotic ring. You could include that if you wanted. And I would notice that the eye is almost as tall as the whole skull is. I notice that the nostril hole is pretty big when you look right through it. It's hard to do on this camera, I'm sorry. I would notice that there's some pretty cool places for muscles to attach. And there's this little notch right here. You can see it if I turn it like this. That's the same notch that red-tailed hawk had. Let me see how much time we have. You have 1 minute left for this drawing. I would notice that there's another little notch right back here. I would notice that this lower mandible, the part that moves when they open their mouth, is pretty thick, and it's much thicker than this little bone right here. If anyone else has something they notice, you can type it in. We have 30 seconds left. 30 seconds. If you want to, you can make notes with, you can write things, descriptions about it, like maybe that this is a creamy, buttery yellow beak, and then you can make a little line pointing to it. I'm going to tell you that the texture of this is pretty smooth. And I know this is just a replica, and so texture is a little bit hard. It's not the real thing, or a little difficult, not just hard. But I do think most skulls are pretty smooth. All right, we have maybe 5 seconds left. And stop. Okay, so those were our 8-minute notes. Thanks everybody for taking notes with me. All right, so that was all I have today. So if anyone has any last minute questions, type them in now. And I want to say thank you so much. I had a lot of fun talking about skulls with you. And if anybody has suggestions for other classes we should do, let us know. Send us an email, type them in the comments here. We're planning on doing scat next week. Anybody know what scat is? It's animal poop. And I actually have I have a scat song that I can share with you. So you'll have to tune in for that. You can find information for that on our website. And let us know if you have ideas for other classes. We have animal furs. I have a lot of mammal skulls I could talk about, just like this. Yeah, I'm excited to do more lessons like this. It's really fun reaching out to all of you. All right, so everybody, stay safe and be well, and remember that nature is there for you. Even if we can't go outside too much, we can still open windows and listen to bird song and watch the birds fly by. So try to get outside if you can, and if you can do it safely without being near other people. And if not, look outside because nature's awesome. Bye, everybody. Thank you.